This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. At least 25 people have been killed and 50 others injured after a train crashed into the buffers at Cairo's main railway station.
The driver jumped out at the last minute. The emergency brake suddenly stopped working. The emergency brake stopped working and he couldn't stop the train.
I am Peter Okwoche, live in Abuja with reaction to President Muhammadu Buhari's victory in last Saturday's elections.
From the comment of several observers, both local and foreign, it is obvious that the elections were both free and fair.
I, Atiku Abubakar, reject the results declared by the Independent National Electoral Commission.
Also in the program, heading home as hundreds of migrants stranded in Yemen are evacuated back to Ethiopia. Others are still risking the treacherous crossing.
The water was high. The sun was too hot. There were a lot of deaths. After 2 days, I saw a lot of people dead in the sea. I was afraid.
And in sport, it's 100 days to the start of the Women's World Cup with preparations underway for Africa's representatives. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. There's been a deadly train crash at Cairo's main railway station. At least 25 people have been killed and 50 injured. Witnesses said the train's locomotive hit a platform buffer at high speed before exploding, causing a huge fire. The BBC's Sally Nabil sent this report for Focus on Africa.
Charred wreckage of a train crash. It speeded into the station, hit a platform, then its fuel tank exploded, causing a huge fire. Many were killed and injured as a result. This tragic crash will scar Egypt's biggest railway station for quite a long time.
The driver jumped out at the last minute. The emergency brake suddenly stopped working. The emergency brake stopped working and he couldn't stop the train. At the last minute, he jumped right onto the platform. He did all he could. I'll say it 3 times, the driver did all he could.
The people here say they have seen many charred bodies lying on the ground. Many of them started running in horror and screaming when the explosion first happened. There were also clouds of thick smoke covering the skies. On my way here, I've seen many ambulance cars and fire trucks surrounding the area. The sirens were deafening.
I've stumbled upon scattered pieces of burned clothes and shoes. Medical staff tried to help as casualty numbers were rising.
Most of the bodies have not yet been identified. The autopsy teams will, of course, take care of this. Some of the injured have also not yet been identified. Some cases are stable, while others are in critical condition. 15 people have been discharged after getting better. We have also brought in teams from our mental health department. These mental health professionals are now deployed across the different hospitals hosting the patients, providing mental health support for both families and patients.
This station, which lies in the heart of Cairo, is always bustling with passengers. The cause of the crash is not yet clear, but only hours later, the Minister of Transportation has resigned and the authorities have ordered an investigation. Egypt has been constantly criticized for the poor safety record of its railway network. In 2017, more than 40 people were killed and around 100 injured when 2 trains collided outside the Mediterranean port city of Alexandria. Although the government has repeatedly promised to make things better, deadly accidents keep happening. Sally Nabil, BBC News, Cairo.
Well, in Nigeria, the Election Commission has declared that Muhammadu Buhari has won another term as president. He defeated the main opposition candidate, Atiku Abubakar, with a margin of nearly 4 million votes. He has called the election a sham and says he will challenge the result in court. Now, support for Mr. Buhari was strongest in the north of the country, as you can see there in green. Mr. Abubakar was popular in the south, shown here in orange, but not enough to claim victory. Well, in total, the president collected just over 15 million votes compared to Mr. Abubakar, whose tally was just over 11 million votes. But there were many who did not vote. In fact, this was Nigeria's lowest turnout since democracy was introduced 20 years ago. Well, Focus on Africa's Peter Okwoche is in Abuja for us with all the very latest. Peter.
Many thanks, Sophie. And indeed, you are correct. The average voting across the country was just 35%. Don't forget that 84 million Nigerians were registered to vote, but way, way, way less than that actually came out. There have been pockets of celebrations here in Abuja, especially amongst youthful supporters of President Buhari. They've been dancing around and driving and tooting their horns, but I'm sure those celebrations will be a bit sad because of the fact that the main opposition's Atiku Abubakar has said he would take the case to court and he rejects those results. My colleague Miney Jones has been gauging the mood.
Back to business as usual. Here in the northern state of Kano, President Buhari won his highest number of votes. The north proved once again to be his stronghold. But even though they're happy, locals are also critical of his efforts over the last 4 years.
This government doesn't consider marketers. But now, as we promised, our leaders sit with him, as he's going to consider marketers now. So we are very happy. I think this time, this tenure, he will consider our marketers now.
We business people need support in terms of capital. His government should do more for us. The economy needs to grow so that our business will improve too.
In Lagos, the country's economic capital, only 1 in 6 even turned up on election day. But concerns are the same.
We are not feeling good that this man is still continuing. People are not happy over it. Everything is so expensive. Everything is expensive. People are facing hardship. And it still continue. It's not, people are not happy at all. We are not happy.
In 2015, Buhari came into power with a surprise win at the polls. He was seen as incorruptible, and voters hoped he would sweep away Nigeria's many problems.
President Buhari's critics have criticized him, saying he's failed to meet campaign promises during his first term. But with pressing issues, including growing unemployment and widespread insecurity, Nigerians will be expecting much more effective leadership this time round.
I, Atiku Abubakar, reject the results declared by the Independent National Electoral Commission. From the comment of several observers, both local and foreign, it is obvious that the elections were both free and fair.
In his victory speech, President Buhari promised to improve the country's economy. But analysts say his current policies won't be enough.
The unemployment numbers are still going up. They've gone up to the highest level since we started keeping records, at least since we started democracy in 1999. And it's not clear that those programs have worked so far. So it's not clear that they will continue to work. I think they need to think of a new strategy that kind of focuses more on the private sector. But it remains to be seen if that will be the case.
Voter turnout countrywide in these elections was the lowest in 20 years. While millions chose the president, with a lot left to fix, it seems many are disillusioned with the country's political class. Miney Jones, BBC News, Abuja.
Indeed, a lot in President Muhammadu Buhari's entry once he is sworn in, I guess, for the second term, apart from the insecurity that pervades this vast country. He has to deal with youth unemployment, as well as we heard there in that report, the economy, a struggling economy, just barely out of recession. And let's just concentrate that a little bit on that a little bit now and speak to Nigeria's first professor of capital finance, Uche Uwaleke, and he's also the head of the Banking and Finance Department at Nasarawa State University. I've spoken to a lot of economists who say that President Muhammadu Buhari got the economy wrong in his first 4 years as president. What does he need to do in his next 4 years?
Well, I think the victory is an opportunity for him to consolidate on the marginal gains recorded so far. You recall that shortly after he came to power, in 2015. The economy went into recession. And as we speak, one can say that the economy is once more on the path of recovery, having posted a 1.93% growth rate last year. In 2016, the economy, tanked by as low as 1.56%. So we are beginning to see a recovery in economic growth. If you look at other sectors too, we are also beginning to see some semblance of macroeconomic stability. Inflation rate, decelerating, exchange rate, stability, accretion to reserves. The ease of doing business generally, has been on the...
Yes, but even if there's a marginal growth in economy, if it's not trickling down to the ordinary people, I mean, if you look at the issue of joblessness or youth unemployment, it's doubled since he came into power 4 years ago. How does he tackle something that immense?
Yes, I agree with you. That's principally because the expansion we are seeing in the economy is not enough to create those jobs. It's not, you could say it's fragile, and it's not, as inclusive as one should expect. So until the economy grows at a rate that is higher than population growth rate, we will not begin to see, the effect on the, masses, so to say. So the challenge really is in ensuring that we attain, reasonable growth rates that is not only high, but also inclusive, and not the one that is, jobless. And that also speaks to a continuous investment in infrastructure. Because if you don't invest in infrastructure, the enabling environment for jobs to be created won't be there. If there's no infrastructure, foreign investors will not even come to, invest in Nigeria for jobs to be created.
Apart from infrastructure, I mean, which he did a fair bit of during his first 4 years, he promised to diversify the economy, because with oil, you do not have control of the international prices. Has he done enough to diversify the economy?
Yes, we are saying the same thing. Infrastructure is the major enabler. If you're talking about diversifying the economy, say into agriculture, you want to also involve the employment elastic sectors of the economy, like the ICT and the creative industry, where we have arts and entertainment. Okay, these are potential revenue earners for the country. Tourism, all this will be enabled by adequate infrastructure. So in a country where the stock of infrastructure is just 30% of GDP, it doesn't enable job creation.
I think one of his biggest criticisms is the fact that he doesn't listen, not even to his economic advisors. I mean, if you could, sit down one-on-one with him, what would you be asking him to do?
Yes, I'll be asking him to focus on the 3 areas, to continue to focus on the 3 areas that he rode onto power. That's talking about insecurity, state corruption, which are these two also rub off positively on the economy if you get them right. Look at insecurity, for example. The major challenge we have now, aside from the insurgency, which has been largely tackled, is the issue of farmers' herders crisis, which has
Absolutely, and we've talked about that on Focus. Uche Waleke, Professor of Capital Finance and Head of Banking and Finance Department at Nasarawa State University. Thank you very much for being on Focus on Africa. So, Sophie, there you have it. A lot in his entry, and he'll have to come out of the blocks really fast if he's going to tackle them in the next 4 years.
All right.
Back to you.
All right, Peter Okoche, it's been quite a busy 1 month for you there in Nigeria, but thank you for the updates. Well, let's now take a quick look at other stories making the headlines across Africa. People in Sudan can access social media again for the first time in 10 weeks. The authorities had blocked access in an effort to stop anti-government demonstrations from spreading. The protests began in December. They've continued despite President Omar al-Bashir declaring a state of emergency and banning public gatherings. The former president of Seychelles, Frans Albert René, has died at the age of 83. He seized power in a coup in 1977, the year after independence from Britain, and ruled for 27 years. Fancy a dinner with Ethiopia's Prime Minister? You might just be able to do so, but it'll set you back at least $175,000. Now, authorities there have announced they are planning a fundraiser hosted by Abiy Ahmed. They hope to raise billions of dollars for infrastructure projects. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, Mimi Fawaz with all the sport. More English Premier League matches today as the pressure for the title race increases. I'm Sophie Ikenya and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top stories on this program: at least 25 people have been killed and 50 injured in a train crash at Cairo's main railway station. Witnesses said the train's locomotive hit a platform buffer at high speed before exploding. Muhammadu Buhari has been elected as Nigeria's president for a second term. The opposition candidate Atiku Abubakar says he will challenge the results. Now, hundreds of Ethiopians who are stranded in Yemen have been evacuated back home. More than 50 people died recently when 2 boats sunk in Djibouti as they tried to get to Yemen. It's thought there are still many migrants stuck in both countries as people try to cross the Arabian Peninsula to find work. The BBC's Emmanuel Igunza has more.
Children enjoying playtime within the safety of a UN compound, happy to be thousands of miles away from the horrors of war they have just escaped. The young, the old and the wounded are among hundreds who have been rescued from smuggler boats headed for Yemen, despite the war there which has been raging since 2015. This young man tells me he was scheduled to board a boat to Yemen last January, but he was too scared.
A lot of problems.
There were too many problems. Too many problems. The water was high. The sun was too hot. There were a lot of deaths. After 2 days, I saw a lot of people dead in the sea. I was afraid.
He would have been aboard one of the 2 ships that capsized off the coast of Djibouti in late January that killed more than 50 of his countrymen. And all these young people here have the same horror stories of that dangerous journey, witnessing deaths, rapes, beatings, torture and extortion at the hands of human traffickers whom they had paid to get them across the sea. And even when the migrants get to Yemen, the dangers don't stop there. Destu Ahmed, a mother of 2 young boys, tells me how she cheated death after being caught in the crossfire in the Yemeni town of Aden, where separatists have been battling forces loyal to the president.
I was sleeping in my room when I heard gunshots. I did not know I was hit, but my hand was numb and there was blood everywhere. The next thing I know is that I was in hospital where I stayed for 3 weeks. I'm lucky to be alive.
The deaths at sea of more than 50 migrants last month in Djibouti has brought the focus on a migratory route rarely capturing the headlines. Thousands have died attempting to pass through Yemen heading to Saudi Arabia and Oman as their final destination in search of work and better economic opportunities. Last year alone, more than 150 people died in similar tragedies, and yet more continue to try and make the crossing. Ethiopian authorities and the European Union have been trying to find solutions to the migrant crisis. This month has seen a top EU delegation visit the country to assess the situation.
Unfortunately, we'll continue to see situations where migrants continue losing their lives. So it's incumbent upon all concerned stakeholders and partners to do everything we can to provide rescue services at sea, to complement the efforts that have been done here in Ethiopia to educate migrants about the dangers that they face on this migratory route.
The concern among authorities here is that the message of the dangers of that journey isn't getting to everyone fast enough, and that even those who hear the warnings ignore them, lured by tales of wealth and good life across the seas. Today, Desta and other survivors begin the long journey home. Many more won't be so lucky. Emmanuel Igunza, BBC News, Addis Ababa.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport with Mimi.
Thank you, Sophie. A lot of football today. The Women's World Cup kicks off in just over 3 months' time in France. Both Nigeria and South Africa have qualified. They are continuing with their preparations for the tournament with the Cyprus Cup, which began today. Now, earlier on, South Africa drew 2-2 with Finland. And the other match, which is currently going on, is Nigeria, who are taking on Austria. And Austria are leading in that match 3-1. BBC's Janine Anthony, who is in Lagos, has been telling us more about how the African teams are getting ready for this summer's competition.
It's officially 100 days to the start of the 8th edition of the FIFA Women's World Cup, scheduled to take place in France between June 7 and July 7, 2019. Africa has 3 participants, so how are preparations coming along? For Nigeria, the reigning African champions who have been to every edition of the Women's World Cup, they are currently participating in the Cyprus Cup. They're also taking on the likes of Austria, Slovakia and Belgium. Last month in China, they took part in the China Invitational, and the NFF, which is the Nigeria Football Federation, they also announced that Nigeria will be playing either Spain or Canada, and then Jamaica also have indicated interest in playing the Super Falcons, while the team will have an Austrian training tour sometime in May and will play 2 tune-up games. For South Africa, they took on the Netherlands and Sweden in January, and they're also in the same Cyprus Cup. Earlier today, they did take on Finland and will be facing Czech Republic and Korea. They will also be playing the world champions United States of America in a send-off series in May. For Cameroon, there is currently a training tour in Cameroon, and the girls have been in camp since the 5th of this month. They'll be finishing that training camp tomorrow, 28th of February, to recommence at another time.
Now, more English Premier League action today. 6 in total. Chelsea hosting Tottenham at home. Interesting to see how things will turn out there after the events that unfolded in their FA Cup defeat to Manchester City over the weekend. But with the battle of the title race heating up, the defending champions Manchester City will be looking to get back to the top as they take on West Ham at home. It's just 1 point separating them, and Liverpool manager Pep Guardiola is being cautious ahead of the fixture.
Still, they are leading this tournament. So far, they were better than us, than Tottenham, than the other one. So. Honestly, I didn't watch the game against United, so of course it was one period that in 9 games we lost 4, I think so, in a month ago in 9 games. So during the season, only one team was stable, was Manchester City last season. Like, we won a lot of games, but these kind of things happen during the season. So still 11 games to play. They are leading for 1 point, so of course it's shorter than I expect.
Still with the English Premier League, Liverpool, well, they can extend their advantage at the top when they face 7th place Watford today.
Watford is a difficult one, of course. They are on a good run, and the thing is they have different styles of football they play. Usually they play against we made an analysis, obviously, and against the top 6 they don't have a lot of possession, obviously, because they are a proper counter-attacking threat, good around set pieces, stuff like that, good around second balls. So deep defending, all that stuff, that is different. They play other teams, then they are much more proactive, let me say like this.
And finally, staying with Liverpool and one of their former players, Kolo Touré. He's won the Africa Cup of Nations and Premier League titles, amongst others. And now he's back in the English Premier League. The former Ivory Coast international has been confirmed as the first-team coach at Leicester City. He moves from Celtic alongside the new Foxes manager, Brendan Rodgers. The pair have formed a successful coaching partnership since joining forces in 2017, winning the Scottish domestic treble last season. And that's all the sport. It's great to see Kolo Touré doing so well. I remember interviewing him a few years ago, so it's great to see players going into coaching.
Was this part of his dream?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the sport, Mimi. Thank you. Well, before we go, a quick look again at our top story here on Focus on Africa. There's been a deadly train crash at Cairo's main railway station. At least 25 people have been killed and 50 injured. Witnesses say the train's locomotive hit a platform buffer at high speed before exploding, causing a huge fire. The Egyptian Prime Minister has accepted the resignation of the Transport Minister following the crash. Oh, don't forget you can get in touch with me on Twitter. I'm @CKenya. That's all from the program, from me and the rest of the Focus on Africa team. Thank you for your company.